Hey, this is Sabrina Monarch of monarchastrology.com, bringing you the astrology forecast for August 25th to 31st, 2021. So I just want to go ahead and give you a thank you for being here. If you are a regular, or welcome if you're new here. Go ahead and like this video and subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so that you'll get notifications of when new videos come out. I am in my new place, still haven't decorated behind me, but it will happen eventually. This week, we have a few things that have me meditating on bringing the primal self into relationships, bringing your most authentic self into relationships, which is a spiralic or ongoing layered process, right? Because we're always discovering and deepening into who we are. We're unraveling layers of conditioning and becoming more just who we intrinsically are before we added on all that, gunk of extra, just kind of conditioning from society, family, trauma, whatever it is. And then when we get into that core, deeper into that core, then there's new maybe ways of communicating, new behaviors, new inspirations that come from that place. And there's a few things that have me thinking about this. One is that there's going to be an opposition between Venus and Libra and Chiron and Aries. And then, however subtle it is to make this association here, Mercury and Virgo will trine Pluto and Capricorn. And then Mercury will enter Libra shortly thereafter, and it's going to be in Libra for some time. And as a Mercury Venus person myself, so Mercury and Libra combines, the Venus and Mercury archetypes. I love thinking about the craft that goes into relationship and the craft that goes into charisma or charm, and just noting even like awkward little places in social situations where you wish you had like the right way of navigating it, and you kind of think about that social nuance and then come up with something for that. Just kind of nerdy little Venusian things to think about. But it's interesting because this can come from so many different places. It can come from a really contracted or really kind of false place of I'm going to use my intelligence to fit in better to a community that I don't actually belong to, or a worldview that I don't actually belong to, versus I have this deep intention or desire within myself, and I want to effectively communicate that or effectively build that bridge in relationship. And I think that that's what the craft of Mercury and Libra is going to bring forth. Mercury and Libra will spend some time there because of the upcoming retrograde. So when I share these forecasts with you on YouTube and on Magic of the Spheres podcast, I'm reading to you versions of what I've written. I've been writing forecasts since 2015 and recently branched out to bring them onto video as well. So if you want to see the written version, you can always go to monarchastrology.com or get on my mailing list. And then I get on video to just expand the conversation and add some extra commentary. So let me dive into what I've written for you, and we'll get started. This week begins with an opposition between Venus and Libra and Chiron and Aries, bringing up activations around self and others, such as how we bring our whole selves into relationship as opposed to abandoning ourselves, right? So there's this really beautiful connection between the Aries and Libra archetypes. My cat was in the closet. Do you want to say hi to me? Whatever, I'll get back to it. So Aries and Libra, you have the individualist Aries, the instinct Aries, and the drive toward connection, Libra. And when it comes to truly being in connection, if we go so far as to abandon our own impulses, instincts, nature, desires, etc., then we're not really in connection because we've taken ourselves out of the equation. similarly, Libra can get collapsed into the stereotype of it being like a people pleasing kind of thing, when a lot of, true Libra energy that I've seen, and experience is actually quite fierce. It's like knowing what your values are, Venus, and being willing to stand up for them, fight for them even. Okay, now Esme, say hi. She doesn't like me doing that. But I wanted you to see her. So activations around self and other, bringing our whole self into relationships, or how we actually transform as an individual because of our connections. Okay, now she's sitting here, I think we'll be settled. Mercury in Virgo will trine Pluto and Capricorn before Mercury enters Libra. And this could be a window into realizing more concretely how we have aligned ourselves into certain states of conformity, altering or adjusting ourselves to fit conventions, however grand or minute in scale. So why I'm saying that is Virgo and Capricorn. So we have Virgo, sign that relates to details and refinement and craft and perfecting, making things more accurate. And Capricorn, which relates to how things have been done over time, historical conditioning, our own patterns that are deeply, like if you think about a wall of rock where you can see the layers of sediment, or a tree ring, or a tree, cut, and you can see all these different tree rings. Capricorn is kind of that process of things getting more formed and more crystallized. Pluto and Capricorn, where this transit of Pluto has been since 2008, has been a descent process around unraveling social conditioning and our deepest enmeshments to the status quo. So there's really a lot of descent, happening globally in terms of upheaval, because we had the Uranus-Pluto square 2012 to 2015, and now we're in this Saturn-Uranus square. So there's a lot of instability themes happening right now, but there's also this deeper undercurrent of Pluto and Capricorn, which is a lot of distrust of authority, or kind of like seeing through conventional authority. And it's also really working with our projections and our power versus powerlessness themes around authority, and where we can have greater authorship, greater authority in our own lives. So for example, when it comes to caring about what other people think to the detriment of being creatively expressed within your deepest truth, you're either stepping into the authority of being your full self and leading your life from that place, or you are projecting that power onto others to give you the validation or give you the green light or the red light as to whether or not you're allowed to be yourself in that way in this reality. So there's a kind of unconscious codependency that occurs for a lot of people when they're so concerned about not fitting in or being too weird, or any of these things, that they don't actually pursue that deeper thing within themselves. And then even when we are, doing our own thing, or we feel like we're, on our path or something, Pluto and Capricorn can relate to the process of continually unraveling where we get conditioned, where we have this idea of ourselves that becomes a thick ego construct, so that new information, new experiences can be coming in, but we're already filtering and compartmentalizing them into the concept of who we think we are, and feeling, secure and holding on to those things, instead of having room and spaciousness for disruption to those identities that we've aligned ourselves with and identified with. Identities that we've identified with. All right. Then as Mercury enters Libra, later in the week, we have an opportunity to rebalance our ways of being in social connection and relationship. It's like a workshop. Mercury is going to be in Libra for a while due to this upcoming retrograde. As I believe I first heard astrologer Colin Bedell, who I love, say, Libra relates to the intellectual arts of love. As a Venus ruled air sign, air relating to the intellect. The way that we develop communication skills to enhance our relationships becomes super important under this transit. I mean, it's important all the time, but it's going to be emphasized. As Mercury enters Libra, just following the Venus-Chiron opposition and this Mercury-Pluto trine, this could represent that newer realizations about ourselves and our values are also inviting the development of new skills in relationship to match these revelations. So in short, or like kind of a way to summarize that is like, let's say that there's a way that you've been aligning with reality and with relating to people that's coming from a construct that you've then kind of unraveled, and you've stepped into a deeper chamber of truth within your inner being. And now when it comes to socializing from that deeper truth, there's going to be new ways of doing that, where you're not just taking the ways that you behaved from the past, but there's something new there. So that's why I think that the craft of learning how to be in relationship really is ongoing, because if we stop growing as a person and stop growing in relationships, I mean, that's just a slow form of death while living, really. And if we're going to be changing and deepening as people, then our relationships are naturally going to be changing and deepening. And we need those kind of Mercury or air sign skill sets, concepts, for example, and communication styles. Like, these can all be very helpful tools to assist us in intimacy, essentially. So, I mean, it's not all about being in our head or being in concepts all day, but some concepts make good maps to enter into territories that are harder to work with without that map. August 26th, 2021. Oh, before I get into our transits in more detail, let me share a few announcements. One is that you can get on my mailing list. It's linked in the notes below. And this is a great way to get the forecast in written version and the link to the YouTube emailed to you every week. It's also a place where I announce course offerings when they're open for enrollment. And it's also the main place that I announce my astrology reading bookings. Usually I announce it to the mailing list and they sell out on the mailing list, and I'm not announcing them very much on socials anymore. Also, if you follow me on social media or you follow me on YouTube, getting on the mailing list is a way to stay in touch and be in community without depending on the algorithms or the notifications. That being said, I love social media. I literally love it. I have a whole cosmology about the, liberating value of social media. So if you do want to connect with me there, my Instagram is Sabrina Monarch, and Instagram is pretty much my favorite platform. I'm on other ones, but I feel the most aligned with Instagram. Let's see. So my evolutionary astrology intensive is coming up, and now enrollment is actually open. So you can go to the course page and sign up. I also have a scholarship application, which will be linked below as well. We're beginning November, and it'll be the 9th run of this course. And if you're resonating with the content I share week to week, like you like this field, you resonate with it, you're going to love the content in this course. And this course is designed to be like a really comprehensive introduction and or deepening into the world of evolutionary astrology. So whether you're newer to astrology or pretty seasoned, it's an all levels course, and it works because we start with basics and like foundational things like the archetypes and the planets. But we go so deep into them that it will be stimulating for you if you've already been studying for a while. You can go ahead and read student testimonials about this course on the course page. And I'll also just add that it's a Pluto-based, lunar node-based astrology. Evolutionary astrology is a particular branch of astrology that looks at the natal chart from the perspective of the soul's ongoing evolution. It's a reincarnation-based astrology. But I find in all this time that I've spent with it, that it's also really a wisdom school, that it is really a world expander, because it works so much with the outer planets, which represent things that are beyond ordinary life. So it's hard for me to actually express how profound this material is. And I'm laughing because I don't believe in saying that things are difficult to express, because I think that that's, you can express it, you just have to take the time. But that being said, I'll just leave it at that. But go ahead and check out the course page. You can email me if you have questions about how this course might resonate with you personally, with your concerns or your desires and goals in studying astrology. I just ask that if you're going to ask me questions about the course, that it is something personal, that it's not something that you could find on the course page itself, like the dates or the cost or things like that. That's all listed. But if you have a personal question, you want to talk to me about your learning goals, I'm happy to email with you. And that's Sabrina@monarchastrology.com. And then I also, my novel, The Garden of Sleeping Hammers, is out. You can find it on Barnes & Noble, paperback or hardcover. The links are in the notes. And I will get back to our week. So August 26th, 2021, Venus in 12 degrees of Libra will oppose Chiron retrograde in 12 degrees of Aries at 6:24 a.m. Pacific. This synodic cycle began with Venus and Chiron joined up in Aries, both conjunct the sun at 8 degrees. So we had a sun, Venus, Chiron, 8 degrees Aries lineup on March 28th, earlier this year. It was also a full moon in Libra. So think back to that time period of, that was around the equinox, the spring equinox. So just think end of March, beginning of April. What was unfolding in your heart space during that time? You might consider how you were feeling around matters of the heart at that time, what seeds were being planted, and how they are more visible now at this symbolic full moon moment between Chiron and Venus. Venus-Chiron themes relate to heart healing. It relates to the wounding we already have that gets activated or triggered in relationships with others. Right? So really kind of at the soul work level, thinking about what is getting rubbed up against within you, that's already there. There's a soul level accountability in that increases personal power when we take accountability for our reactions or responses to things. It's kind of like just our side of the street, our side of the story, as opposed to putting all of that energy, projecting it onto the other as, they should treat me different or they should be different or any of that. That is important to choose people, to make choices in relationship that reflect how we desire to be treated. But the inner work of figuring out why something bothers us at the inner level is going to be a lot more of a gateway to soul than just projection and blame land. Venus-Chiron can also relate to the opening we feel when we experience love in a place we are not quite used to it. We are initiated into deeper mysteries of the heart. So I want to share something for a bit. I think it's been some time. Maybe it's happened throughout my life, but it's been an increasing thing, maybe since around this time period of Venus and Chiron conjunct at the end of March. But I'll notice that when I'm experiencing someone complimenting me, or just a really kind of effervescent moment of affection and joy being exchanged, that sometimes it's so intense that like my heart actually hurts. And for a little bit, I thought there was something kind of wrong with me. Like I was like, why is my heart like unable to contain this? Like I was judging myself for it. And I didn't even talk that much about it. Like it was this private, like I almost feel shame. Like, why does my heart hurt? And then I told a friend about it, somewhat casually. And he goes like, oh yeah, when that happens, you just have to like do something dramatic or be like, you're hurting my heart, and like just move that energy. And so I tried it out, just like telling people when that was happening and, people laughing. And I just kind of like was able to actually hold that a little bit more of like, okay, my heart's expanding. There's nothing wrong with me. And it's okay to be vulnerable of like, I think there's something to Leo thinking about the heart. And I think about cats, like when you are petting them and if they get overstimulated at some point from being pet and just like the way that they respond, I feel like is kind of how the heart feels when it's like so much, And so with Venus Chiron, I think it could really go either way, where it's like something's happening and we're feeling heartache or heartbreak because we're sad, we're grieving, we feel rejected, like we're not having a fun experience of the heart, or we are experiencing something that is past our normal threshold. And so we're being initiated into a kind of heart expansion and it still hurts. Like my heart is hurting this whole time that I'm talking about this. So just being with that. And then with Venus and Libra opposing Chiron and Aries, there can be an activation around choice. So choice being, exactly what it means, like making choices. The conditions do not have to be any certain way. They're not necessarily ideal. We make choices with the options available to us and the options we can imagine. And there's mysteries to that because there's often choices that we don't even have on our conscious register or our repertoire of here's what I can do in this situation, but there are these kind of hidden choices often. Choices reflect our values, and being self-aware of our choices allows us to see how we are acting upon our values and where we are coming from a more unconscious place. So again, talking about soul level accountability, when you're actually accounting for the choices that you're making in situations and like owning the choices that you're making, not having a story that you're being forced into everything that you're doing by forces outside of you, right? There's a certain kind of band, I would say, of situations that there's force and you do not have a choice. And those are violent situations. A lot of times we do have choices and we may be kind of feeling tugged at in unconscious ways. Like, I feel like I have to lie in this situation to get what I want, or I'm being kind of transactional. I didn't have a choice. No, I was making a choice to be transactional, right? Like there's an ownership that can come from that. And I think there's also a medicine in just being able to notice the choices we're making without excessive layers of shame about it. But watching the choices that you make, like the moment that someone asks you a question and you don't really want to tell them the truth, so you decide to lie, right? And you're just like, oh, I made that choice again. And you watch yourself doing that. And then another situation appears, very similar. And because you tracked your choice the last time, you're like, let me try saying the truth this time and see what happens, right? So tracking our choices can be very empowering and it's very confronting. Like we have to be willing to face ourselves, which is a Chiron and Aries thing, and Venus choice. Not being aware of our choices is like being drunk, blacking out, and not remembering what happened or why we got there. Like, I don't know, it just happened, there's not an accountability. being aware of our choices is like being lucid. We can track cause and effect, and we can see where we're at. And again, invite for as much neutrality as possible, because shame is like a heavy blanket. It's kind of like an addiction, and it doesn't, I feel like in a lot of cases, actually help. In relationship, accessing one's choice and allowing the choice of others makes way for connection. Suppressing our own values to appease another or attempting to dominate others are both ways that we do not respect choice. And we try to use force, either inwardly in the repression of ourselves or outwardly in the repression of other, to extract a result, instead of actually having the spaciousness for choice and the willingness to deal with the consequences, which is going to be deepened intimacy or a going of separate ways or anywhere there in between. But, actually having the courage to put the truth out there and be willing to take in the truth and hear the truth from others and relate from that place. So simple and so deep, and such a initiatory process. And I know a lot of you listening are already amazing at that. But I find like continuing to be aware or be reminded of it or deepen into it is a way to deepen, our integrity with ourselves and others. Mercury in 24 degrees of Virgo will trine Pluto retrograde in 24 degrees of Capricorn at 7:23 a.m. Pacific. So the same day, the 26th. Pluto in Capricorn points to a larger excavation process around conditioning, what we personally and socially accept as reality because it has been the cumulative experience or teaching, and not because it's actually the truest thing. It's the layers of sediment, it's the layers of rings around the tree. It's grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, it's like the accumulation of information experience that then gets condensed into a reality. Pluto in Capricorn could also relate to historical wealth from deep time, gifts or forms of adaptation that have evolved over long swaths of time. Mercury in Virgo could represent skillfulness, having the precise language, tools, and means. Mercury in Virgo and Pluto in Capricorn are at a disseminating phase trine, a phase which emphasizes sharing information. In some settings, the information being shared is about how to be a skillful participant, Mercury in Virgo, in a larger system that is not necessarily true, just conditioned. In other contexts, truly evolutionary information is being disseminated around how to align Virgo with a deeper source of integrity or groundedness in reality with a much more expansive or primordial context, Pluto and Capricorn. Something, that I really feel into this is like Mercury, Pluto can represent information that's being shared that's helping the species or helping the planet survive. Like Pluto is about survival or about persistence, and it's about transformation and deep kind of adaptation. And not all information that is seeking to be disseminated is actually that helpful. Like I see these Facebook ads, for example, that are marketing to people about like how you can make a 5K online course without any experience. You've never taught before, you don't have an audience, you don't have a mailing list, sign up for this free webinar and find out. And those types of models are usually like using psychological sales to kind of like impulse, connect to someone's pain point, get them emotional, have them impulse buy something, and then probably not even get that engaged with the course, right? And so I see something like that, and it's very Mercury, Pluto, but what is it really doing to help the collective? as opposed to like some of the like wisdom tenders that, I've been to like, one of my teachers at CIS, Brian Swim, was teaching about like these cosmological forces in the universe and these forces beyond the industrial consciousness is what he called it, which is such a Pluto and Capricorn thing. And, getting into this deeper earth-based wisdom, this deeper primordial or cosmological wisdom within. And then as you're in that consciousness, like thinking about how that's going to then, change your being and kind of ripple out. And just because there's, with Pluto, Mercury, I feel like it's discerning the difference between information that's actually connecting you with something primordial and helping you transform in a meaningful way and helping you deepen and evolve versus something that's just a psychological trigger playing on some kind of lower drive. Consider the difference between information that helps you assimilate more with patriarchal conditioning and do a good job in that. Here's what's normal and how to be the best at being normal, versus information that leads you to tap in more with your emotional, primal, erotic body. And where you have deeper wisdom of the latter kind, where you are being invited to share and embody that. So back to social media, people have a really collapsed narrative of social media that I tend to challenge in terms of it being a place where it's, fake. It's not a place of real connection. People are more alienated than ever, even though we're all connected. Like all of these cynical narratives about social media, when my lived experience with it is that it has connected me with friends and teachers all over the world since I was a kid. Even in times I felt isolated and alone in my in-person world or my geographical world, but was able to find resonant connections all over the globe. And I think of the internet more as a place like a collective fire, collective commons, and that if you show up there in a fake or contracted way, you're going to have a fake and contracted experience. But if you bring your heart, if you bring your vulnerability, if you want to be seen in the public, there's something that can be deeply magical and transformative. And, I take in the feeling of when people on the internet and their voice has affected me, moved me at my heart, like recognizing how powerful it is that that person chose to share that information, right? And so for me, as someone who shares information online, part of what inspires me about it is like, these are ideas I connect with. I want to share them, and the internet's a great place to do that. But there's like this just Mercury, Pluto, to connect it back. We have these mental identifications and stories and ways that we classify things, like social media is bad, place of disconnection. And Pluto wants to expand past that. Like Pluto is always expanding past limitations or the form of things and getting into something deeper. So this can relate to any place in your life where your mental conceptual frameworks of things is not necessarily serving you, or your mental frameworks are connected to something overly conditioned, something that, everyone thinks, or you've just been told your whole life. And there's something that's kind of bubbling within you of like, I don't think that's actually true, or I don't think that actually serves. And there being a way to kind of transmute those concepts and transmute those ideas during this transit. And then on August 27th, Pallas Athena retrograde in 22 degrees of Pisces will conjunct Neptune retrograde in 22 degrees of Pisces at 2:24 a.m. So the asteroid goddesses like Vesta, Pallas Athena, Juno, and Ceres, they are situated between the inner planets, so Mercury, Mars, Venus, and the social planets, Jupiter and Saturn. So they're representing, these asteroid goddess social archetypes that bridge the personality. the inner planets with a greater social context, Jupiter and Saturn. Pallas Athena specifically helps with strategy and visualization, having a personal vision that becomes expressed and materialized in a social context, like advancing into prominence in one's field or successfully furthering a cause and community. So thinking about I think that a lot of business people actually work a lot with Athena and with visualization. Like you come up with a literal business plan, however detailed or imaginable, but you visualize what you're wanting to create. And then you go ahead and create that thing that you visualized. And so it takes something that kind of was born within you and within your personal sphere and brings it out into the world. That's what I mean about bridging the personality with the social. Pallas Athena relates to the process of having goals and having a brilliant strategy for reaching those goals. She has an internal savviness in this regard, or the appearance of guides and coaches who favor the hero along the journey. So if there's ever been a time where you've really been going for something in your life, you've truly wanted it, you've put everything on the line, you may have been, coming up against struggles and obstacles, but think about who noticed you and was like, yeah, I want to support this person, or if you're like a teacher, a coach, a guide, and noticing the people that come to you who are just like very committed and, they're on that like wave, and you just feel this desire to support them because they're game, like Athena loves that. She loves heroes. So working with Athena, it's like when you're committed to a dream, usually guides will show up, right? Or on the hero's journey, there's like the call to adventure, and you're in this space of setting out and you do meet guides. I think Athena really connects to that process. And Athena could be contacted directly, as in prayer. I love working with her. I think the asteroid goddesses are very friendly. She can also be contacted indirectly by being committed to a vision and seeking and applying strategies for bringing the vision into fruition. And then with Athena conjunct Neptune, there can be ways that our process of materializing a goal through strategic measures is connecting us further with the fabric of the universe. There could be synchronicities or maybe just a faith that is guiding us through the early stages of a dream. We can feel a greater sense of meaning by being on this path. So I love, when getting to hear the inner process of people who have like made it somewhere high up, some very successful person, a celebrity, something, someone of that nature, and hearing about their relationship with faith or kind of what drives them. Those are some codes for sure. And I think it's always profound to hear about like celebrities that have this really deep connection with spirit and just kind of always knew all along that that's the trajectory that they were on, and that's what they prayed for, and that's what they were devoted to. And even the development of their talent was like showing up to the altar of that and inviting the universe to collaborate with them. I think that when we want to get somewhere, when we're aspiring to get somewhere, we don't just do that alone. We do it in community. We do it with support, and we do it with celestial, angelic, spirit guide, ancestral community too. And it's just a really magical experience to be consciously tuned into that and to invite that support and allow that to be part of our way of navigating our goals. Or with this Neptune-Athena transit, we could be experiencing a facing of a particular strategy because Neptune dissolves. This could be spiritualizing. So, for example, a person stops working so hard to fit in somewhere they don't belong. They've given up, they've surrendered that agenda, and that energy is now freed up for cultivating their truer nature and pursuing more resonant environments or relationships, right? Or if you're an entrepreneur and you're learning about a sales technique that is one of those kind of aggressive, manipulative kinds, and what you're selling doesn't resonate with that model. It's like, oh, I can let that go. I don't have to sell or be in business that way. And that making space for a different kind of model to come through. One of the most humble parts of the Athena archetype can be the relinquishing of certain forms of strategy when we have had a paradigm shift. That just because we can use our intelligence to get somewhere doesn't mean it's where we ultimately want to go. Then August 28th, 2021, the sun in 6 degrees of Virgo will square the lunar nodes in 6 degrees Sagittarius, the south node, and 6 degrees Gemini, north node, 11:56 p.m. So sun square the nodes. Life is very likely giving us opportunities to see ourselves and our experience through new angles. We are getting new pieces of information, so the Gemini north node, information influx, that are not necessarily fitting into the existing narrative, Sag. We can resist this by trying to rationalize new information to fit an older paradigm, thus collapsing that moment of unknown into a known, which is another way here of talking about dogma. There's a subtle invitation to feel into who we are when we are exploring new ideas and thoughts and new possibilities without knowing why or what ultimate end they will lead to, just to feed our curiosity and see what moves and shifts inside of us. And August 29th, 2021, Mercury enters Libra at 10:10 p.m. Pacific. Mercury will retrograde in 25 degrees of Libra on September 26th, station direct in 10 degrees Libra on October 18th, and finally leave Libra on November 5th. So until November 5th, we have Mercury in Libra. Due to the retrograde, we have a longer stay of Mercury in Libra. Mercury usually spends a few weeks, not 2 months, in a sign. So we have more time to get to know this placement. Mercury in Libra highlights our mental register of social dynamics and social graces, and our understanding of cause and effect in social spheres, and the general capacity to read the room. Perhaps you have noticed that sharing a photo of you and your puppy elicits warmth and friendliness from mostly everyone, but sharing your thoughts on current events that are divisive or polarizing in nature is a stickier territory. Libra is our awareness of social cause and effect, right? And Mercury is going to be the craft or intricacies therein. Libra can even be the agreeing and contesting voices we hear and imagine in our minds in response to something we would say, our awareness of how something might land in a room. I think being able to just intuitively or deductively kind of know how something is going to go over. Still, there's room for surprise, but it's like we have that just social awareness where we're building it. Mercury in Libra may be partially concerned with harmony and things feeling smooth or going over well, the Libran peacemaking, but definitely that is not all there is to it. Mercury in Libra could also be interested in sharing ideas or thoughts that contest the peace in the room, showing up with something more loaded than a picture of you and your puppy. If this is territory that you feel like exploring, so bringing up an unpopular thought, saying something that could disturb the room, and something maybe that's like that you value, right? That's true to you, that feels important for you to share. Not necessarily just about what's happening socially in the world, but maybe in your inner circle, in your relationships, right? So it's not just harmonizing, it can be negotiating or bringing something else in. And And I think that there's an art to this that Mercury and Libra finds compelling. So one way this shows up is smoothing out an idea before it's shared. I'm this way for the most part on social media. A lot of what I share has been smoothed through my own nervous system. I don't tend to share things from a place of active dysregulation. Or I don't tend to share things that actively trigger me to read. Maybe sometimes a little bit. But for the most part, it's like there's a process of smoothing things over. And why I do that is because I've noticed that when I share something that comes from a dysregulated place, or I share something that's just really extremely one-sided, or kind of like I can read it and already know what people are going to say, that's like challenging it, that, lo and behold, is just what happens. Versus when something's really smoothed out and well balanced, people read it and they're like, okay, sure, and they may have different opinions about it, but even the way that they show up to challenge that would come across as more balanced. Like, I hear what you're saying, here's me interacting with your content, and this is something that I think, and there's just a different way versus if I say something extreme, kind of unedited, just kind of like frayed around the edges, it's going to land in a way that's also harsher. Like, I just know that, right? And, generally, whenever someone is extreme in their perspective in a way that feels a little one-sided or bombastic, someone in the room will compulsively feel the need to balance them with their response. If you're this person, it might be interesting to consider why this compulsion and where it's valuable versus where it isn't. It's a very strange kind of social balancing thing that happens, especially on the internet. And I think it's worth taking inner inventory of like what compels us to be arguing with people on the internet, right? Like, it's hard for me to understand a lot of times. On the other hand, a carefully deliberated or balanced thought just tends to land softer in the field. So if you like debate, if you love it, then you say something frayed around the edges, you say something extreme, and lo and behold, you get to have a debate. If you're not that interested in debate, you can tell people that, but also like the way that you're smoothing over your thoughts would have that effect. I also learned this in school. Rick Tarnas was saying one time in a writing workshop that when it comes to academic writing, that if your argument isn't well balanced in an essay, for example, there's room for people to contest it, or like give a like the gestalt will balance you naturally, versus if you've actually thought about those counter arguments and you include it into your essay, your argument will be more balanced. So essentially, this is kind of just a natural harmonic dynamic that happens in social spheres. If someone is extreme in a particular way or one-sided, the environment tends to balance them. And just knowing that, how are you going to play with that? In a more all-encompassing way, reading the room becomes another way to see ourselves in the mirror, facing how people respond to us, and then letting those reflections move us. Whether we decide we don't care about these opinions from others, i.e., people are projecting their values onto us and we don't wish to accept those projections, how we might navigate those projections, such as informing people to counter those projections, or we adjust ourselves to harmonize more in our social environment. Whether we do that, we're allowing these reflections to help us shape our values and our communicative capacity. So this is super powerful. And there's some, inner accountability here where if you notice that you're getting a repetitive reflection from other people, at the internal level, there is some agency from this Libra perspective, and Libra, caring about the arts of charisma and grace, and Mercury being about communication, that we can actually take the responses that we can, keep getting in the mirror and see what parts of our own embodiment, what parts of our own, self-image, inner talk are being reflected by those things. So I can give an example that for me is like a writer and someone who like has edited my own writing or gotten proofreading and stuff. And I watch the videos that I make, not every time, but I do. And I look back at them. Speaking with an authoritative tone is something that became important for me to learn when it was like, I have ideas, I want to share them on social media. And if I show up with, I don't know, like maybe kind of energy, that it's not going to be as inviting as if I'm just offering something with confidence. And so there's particular ways of just sharing a thought, letting it land, right? A lot of times when we're sharing something that we feel vulnerable about, maybe it's a newer thought, we can't quite tell how the room is reading it, we feel insecure that we're putting ourselves out there, we'll get kind of nervous and we'll finish it up with, if this makes sense, and that energy, it's like, what if you just say the thing and you're confident about the thing and you just let it have some space afterwards? Another one is, I come from Southern California, so I do have, whether I still have it or I've in some ways shifted it, like the Southern California dialect, the Valley Girl dialect, and a lot of upspeak. And at times earlier in my life, when I was deeper in that dialect, just feeling the ways that people responded to it, if I was trying to express my knowledge and like share something, I noticed that my upspeak wasn't always, an upspeak is when you ask things like a question all the time. And so you're saying something that you feel really certain about, but you're asking it as a question, like that, like these little nuances of communication, seeing how they track in the environment, how you get reflected, and making corrections or shifting them as you desire. Sometimes people get the reflection from a lot of people that they're kind of mean, like, or that people feel scared of them or intimidated by them. And someone who receives that reflection, as they take inventory of it, maybe this is a person who doesn't take a lot of bullshit. This is a person who knows how to hold their own. Like, this is a person who may have a defensive, energy. This person may also be super confident. This person may be, whatever it is, like there's a set of personality traits. But if that person feels in their heart, like, I don't want people to be afraid of me, how can I, in my demeanor, be like, stretch into my capacity to be welcoming and friendly and create more invitation so that people don't feel scared to approach me, right? Or maybe you feel overly approachable. You keep getting attention that you feel is unwanted, or people are asking for your time and energy all the time and you don't like it. And you're wanting to develop the parts of your personality that are more step back energy, right? And so just thinking about these things is like a creative craft with Mercury and Libra of what reflections are you getting? And if you don't like those reflections, how can you change? Like, what parts of yourself are those reflections connected to? And of course, if you're getting reflections that validate the things that you've set intentions for, celebrate that. If you have been seeking to call in more connection and intimacy in your life, and that's what you're experiencing, celebrate that. If you have been developing the courage to put yourself out there and share your ideas and let yourself be seen, and people are seeing you and complimenting you and engaging with you, celebrate that too. Mercury will retrograde in this sign, suggesting it will be a time to internalize and go within, related to how we pick up the reflections from others in the practice of reading the room. If we repetitively get a kind of reflection from the external that we don't like or agree with, there may be an alchemy that comes from sitting with that and feeling into where we could make different choices, embody different affect, and create a different musicality in our life than the notes that are already being played. So thank you for listening to this forecast. I really love and appreciate you. Go ahead and like this video if you haven't already. Leave a comment. Let me know how you're doing, what reflections you are getting from other people, and how you're working with that. I think it's a really, of course, deep and multivalent thing. Sometimes even if you feel a certain way and other people around you feel like are not seeing you constantly, at a soul level, that can be an invitation to believe and see yourself. And if you're taking in those things, part of it is also feeling into whose reflections and what relationship you have with those people that are giving you those reflections, right? My dad would say something when I was growing up of consider the source. So if someone critiques you, consider the source. What do you think of that person? And if that's someone who you really admire and respect and they have a critique of you, you're going to feel that different than someone who lives their life in a way that you don't really feel a lot of resonance or respect for. So I think I may wrap this up here. Just in short, a few months ahead of really considering the nuances and intricacies of relationship and communication and social graces. And this week leading up to this Mercury and Libra ingress with a Venus Chiron opposition. So feeling into activations in your heart and how you are balancing self and other in relationship. Mercury trine Pluto, feeling into how your ideas are transforming and how the ways that you're behaving and aligning with your ideas and concepts is also transforming as your worldview shifts or unravels. Again, thank you for being here, and I'll see you soon.